Hello again and welcome to Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy. I'm your host, certified sex therapist Laurie Watson, author of Wanting Sex Again, and blogger at Psychology Today and WebMD. And I have with me Dr. Adam Matthews, my co-host, who's a couples therapist, psychotherapist, and president of NCAMFT. Foreplay is dedicated to helping couples keep it hot. Thanks for listening. Now on to today's topic.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy Podcast. I am your co-host, Dr. Adam Matthews, along with our host, the fabulous Laurie Watson. How you doing today, Laurie?
I am so good.
You're so good.
Mostly because you've been talking about what you've been baking over the weekend.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Gosh.
I'm just learning how to bake. I'm novice baker.
Ooh.
I make all kinds of mistakes and then have to start over all over again.
And then you have to eat your mistakes.
And then you have to eat your mistakes.
So good.
Yeah, but I'm learning how to make brioche.
Brioche.
Because I love bread.
Yes.
And I made brioche with brie this weekend. I didn't put enough brie in it.
And tell what you did this morning with it, the leftovers.
What did I do this morning with it? Oh, you can reheat it and then put some apricot jam on it or some any kind of jam, really. I love jam, too. Bread and jam.
It is totally sinful. Totally sinful.
No, it's heavenly.
Oh, my gosh, all those carbs.
It is perfect. It is perfect. That's one of the things.
You're making me drool.
That's one of the things me and my wife bonded over when we first started dating.
Or brioche?
Not baking, no, eating bread. Like croissants and cafes, right?
Too fun. Too fun.
And that's croissants and cappuccino. That's our thing. So,
yeah, cappuccino.
But we are talking today about that before marriage stage, the premarital phase of relationships, like when you know that's
when you still eat bread,
when you still eat bread,
when you can still afford carbs.
Listen, I am carb positive. I am carb positive. I just want you to know that. But when we started, that period of time when you're trying to decide if this is the person that you want to spend your life with, if you want to be married to, the person you want to be committed to. My wife had to go to a secluded cabin in Montana to decide whether I was going to be the one. She had to travel like 2,000 miles and be by herself in the snow
she had to
decide.
Think about it for a couple of months before she could decide.
Oh, she was very intentional with the decision. She wasn't gonna rush into it lightly, which I think is just super smart, and I wish more people would do.
Yeah.
Right?
I was like crazy about my husband from the very beginning.
You just rushed in?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we didn't rush in, but we did have a fairly short dating period and a fairly short engagement. But I mean, I knew he was it.
Yeah.
He told me he loved me in like 2 weeks, which was really dumb.
Yeah.
I might say really dumb. I was like, you don't even know me. And I knew enough to know that, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes for a romantic story, but I think a lot of times, so maybe we're going to talk today about some things we wish we would have known, because nobody's perfect, right, when they go into that. Most of the time, especially when you're younger, you're young and dumb, as you said.
Yes.
Try to get married. But if you can slow down enough and start to think about some things, there's some stuff that maybe if we could go back and tell our younger selves about some things to be intentional, not that we would make different choices, right? But we would have maybe thought some things through. What's the top on your list of things that you would have told yourself or wish you would have known before you got married?
I would have really thought about how important a sense of humor is. My husband has a great sense of humor, and that was never on my list. And I just got lucky and got somebody who had that. But that is so important. I also think that, a lot of our listeners are married or are committed, and some of them are asking themselves, gosh, if I'd known what I know now, would I have made another choice? And we want to talk about that from this vantage point, especially about, is there a way to kind of know up front that this is going to be my sexual, exciting partner for the rest of my life? And
but you're going to be able to emotionally connect with that person as well. There's going to be some depth there, right? But you can't. I mean, you can't guarantee something, right? It's not going to be 100%.
You're stealing all my material, man.
Listen, like you can't. But there's some things that you can start to know about that's going to, like, you're going to have to make a decision about whether it is okay with you.
Yeah.
Right. And and just being aware going forward is always helpful.
Right. I mean, I think that one of the things I observe right now is, as people get married, there is one sole feature that they are evaluating in terms of whether or not this would be a good partner, and that's attractiveness. I mean, I think our culture has gone crazy about, can we find, the goal seems to be finding the most attractive partner that I can attract. And that guarantees, right, that I will always feel sexually excited, and that therefore there's some sense in that the person will be a good sexual partner because I'm attracted to them, which I think is so incredibly false. But I would like to bring a broader discussion to that. I think that some of the most important things to look for in a partner are really based in who they are, who their character is.
Yeah. Especially, I love one of the things that you mentioned before, just that they have their character is found in a lot of different things. And I think one of the things that a lot of people don't do when they're considering who they're going to marry is they don't trust what they see from that person, right? They feel like, well, they're going to change or they're going to be different when we get married. And I think for a lot of things, you can trust what you see them doing, right? And so, like, for instance, a history of commitment, right? Is one of the things that you mentioned as something to look for, whether just to anything, that they've been able to hold that commitment to different things, right? They've
been disciplined,
important.
Or they've been dedicated to a sport, or they've finished and completed school, they've had a steady job. I mean, I also think, in other partnerships, that person was faithful and, had a long-term relationship and can explain sort of why it didn't work out, or maybe they are devoted to their family. I mean, you want to measure objectively, is this a person who keeps commitments?
Yeah, and we're not trying to. I don't think you're trying to say that you hold all their sins against them, right? But if you see a pattern of what they are doing, if there's a pattern, a history of cheating in relationships, for instance, or dropping out of things, not completing things, like that would be a red flag to you, right?
That's a red flag, absolutely,
for sure.
Yeah, and I think that in the bloom of romance, right, what we don't see is the potential pitfalls of the relationship. And then oftentimes in the critical light of marriage or long-term partnership, we forget about the beautiful things in our partner. We're wearing rose-colored glasses, and then we wear sunglasses that, are critical.
Yeah, so being able to take those off and see both sides.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other side of when you work it all through, right? Then we have clear vision. We see a person who has some problems, but who has stellar qualities as well. But in the beginning, I think, finding somebody who's a careful listener, I think that's really important.
Yeah. How do you describe listening? Because I think a lot of people misunderstand listening. Like, what would you say? What makes a careful listener?
I think with my husband, that stood out to me a lot. I mean, I remember we were just friends and we were sitting at the table, and it was kind of like, time dropped away. And there was this sense of absorption that he was really caring about what I said and listening intently to my arguments and my thoughts about different issues. And it was like, ooh, so flattering, but it was... I really sense this involvement, attention, presence to what I was talking about, not necessarily him, building an argument or trying to be funny or anything. It was like he was really paying attention, and that told me something about him.
He heard what you said. He didn't make it all about him.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. If somebody's always trying to fire back or make it about them, they're not really listening to you.
Right.
Which is vital for a long-term health of a relationship, right?
Exactly.
That they're really able to listen to each other. You also talk about there not any red flags. What would you consider some big red flags?
Well, certainly,
just
what you talked
away.
About, a pattern of relationships that have ended, with infidelity or addictions. I mean, certainly a person who is what we might call a dry drunk, right? Somebody who said, well, I used to be an alcoholic and I don't drink anymore. It's like, come on, that's not sober. Sober is somebody who has faced their addiction, who has worked a program, who is still working a program, who knows their vulnerability. That's different. Or consumer debt.
Yeah.
Somebody, it's different, I think, if somebody has made an investment, like they have a mortgage or they have a car payment or they have school debt and they have progressed in their field. But if somebody has just run up $20,000 in consumer debt,
credit
why
card
is
debt.
that?
Yeah.
Really, you spent clothes and went out to eat and you didn't have the money and now you're paying this off. I mean, that to me is a character issue, and the way they handle money is really important to examine.
Yeah, I think with any of these things, addictions especially, but also with debt, if somebody's not being upfront about their flaws and what the ways that they are recovering and actively working on these things, then those things are still raging on, right?
Yeah.
And I think people have to understand that they cannot save the other person, right, from these things. Especially addiction, I think, is like people try to think, well, again, it's going to be different, or I'm going to be able to fix them, or I'm going to be able to save them from this, or they just need somebody to love them.
Yeah.
Like, no, like that is not going to happen.
Pay attention.
And their addiction is going to become yours.
Right.
Their debt is going to become yours.
Right.
Any kind of possessiveness or jealousy that they distribute that turns into anger and rage, especially, like that's all going to become yours. And so being able to recognize those things and walk away is huge, right?
I had a patient who told me that a guy she was dating, who was a great guy, he was a very skilled technician, and within a few dates, he was linked in somehow to her email. Like was examining her email, had figured it out or whatever. I'm like, nip that in the branch, man. Get rid of that guy. I mean, that kind of invasion.
Nip that in the branch?
That is way beyond the bud.
That's way beyond the bud. Nip that in the branch.
That's a sapling of a problem.
Chop down that tree, man. Just burn the stump.
There is, to me, like when somebody's that invasive in an early relationship, and then, he had all kinds of issues like that kept developing, and it was like, this is a craziness. Or somebody who exhibits, I had another male patient whose female partner, was just doing crazy stuff, like showing up at his work. There was no call for it. He wasn't unfaithful, but she was just really suspicious. And that's the beginning of pathology. You really want to pay attention to that.
That's things that are, if they're trying to control you, right? And controlling behavior is something that is just a huge red flag, I think, as well. The other thing you mentioned that I'm interested in that I haven't heard before is you mentioned to be careful of the pattern of one. What do you mean by the pattern of one?
Okay, so oftentimes in a new relationship, what you see once is actually the beginning of a pattern. I hate to be so cut and dried and say you can never forgive somebody for one thing. But the reality is, right, in a new relationship, if you see your partner lose their temper, you see them treat a waitress badly, you see them talk badly to their family member, you see them talk down their friend, it is often the tip of the iceberg. And we have to, pay attention to that, because it's the beginning. You haven't known somebody long enough to see that it happens over and over and over again. So I often say pattern of one, like when a patient comes to see me and they're late their first session. First time. I know it's there's a resistance. There's an issue with this. It means something. And of course I'm not a scolding parent about that. It's not that they're late. It's just that they're telling me something. And we have to be careful in relationships with people. If they do it once, right, there's a pattern that it often follows. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things is, and that's what I tell people when they're moving really fast in a relationship, my only hesitancy is, have you had enough time to see that person's flaws come out?
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen to see that pattern of one develop? Did they do it again? Is it something that's consistent? Because we're all putting our best face forward, right, and trying to win over the person. So when we don't give that enough time, that's one of the things that becomes really difficult. Well, let's come back and we're going to talk about what to look for, the sexual characteristics for long-term compatibility, and kind of what to be on the lookout for. And we'll be right back. Okay. Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy.
Thank you so much to all our Patreon supporters, right?
Yeah. Patreon is a platform where you can directly support things that you love. We really want to expand the resources that we can be able to provide to you as our listeners.
If, our work touches you and our work helps you, we would be so grateful for your support. Just go to our website, foreplayRST.com, and there you can find a way to support us, and you can see our episodes and our blogs. And thank you so much, guys.
Speaking with certified sex therapist Laurie Watson from Awakening Center for Couples and Intimacy. Laurie, what is an intensive?
So an intensive is 12 to 14 hours of therapy all in one weekend. And it's a way to really make fast progress compared to weekly therapy. There's just so much more you can get done when you have a chunk of time.
Overcome the challenges in your relationship and your sex life. Learn more about intensives and Awakening Center's other services at awakenloveandsex.com.
At Matthews Counseling, we believe it is our job to come alongside you in whatever difficult challenges of life you are in and help you rediscover hope and to find the strength that you have to face those challenges. We strive to create a safe and comfortable place for you to explore who you want to be and identify the obstacles standing in your way. Oftentimes, the first step toward finding help is the hardest, but it can also be the bravest. Give us a call at 919-587-8018. Find us online at matthewscounseling.net. We look forward to working with you.
Hi, we're back with Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy talking about premarital advice and just sort of what to look for. I would say that many people come into a session and they say, you know, if I'd known what I know now, I would have chosen differently in terms of sexual compatibility. And what I would like to say is this is very difficult, but oftentimes those people who have hot sex before marriage actually end up in about the same place, you know, a few years in as the people who did not have sex or did not have hot sex or needed to warm up. So, but if you're still looking, how can you know, like what kinds of things might tell you about an eventual outcome sexually?
Yeah, and we talked in the first part about that emotional part, that character part, and talking about sexual compatibility for long term. You were mentioning before in the beginning that it not just looking at attraction, right?
Right.
That attraction is important.
Yeah, and I would say absolutely you have to be attracted to your partner and they have to be attracted to you. Mm. And, you know, I have lots of people who come in and say, you know, I was never really attracted to my partner, but they were a great person. That's why I married him. And now I'm, you know, I'm thinking again about that. And it's like, why would you marry somebody that you were not attracted to? No. You know, I mean, I think it doesn't have to be the most attractive. And that might be what they're saying sometimes is this wasn't the most attractive person I could have found. Well, it's like, right, because there's a balance against the many characteristics that make for a good life partnership.
I think there are some people who could feel like that's a shallow characteristic to base a relationship on. Because on one hand, you have people that just go after the attractive partner.
Sure.
But then on the other hand, you have people that react against that and say, well, I want something deeper, so that means I'm not going to be attracted. I'm not going to value being attracted to them. But what you're saying is there has to be a balance between there. There has to be both things.
Right. I mean, I don't think it necessarily has to be, you know, you look the most handsome or you're the most beautiful or even handsome. But there's something inside that feels this chemistry, whether it's the way they flirt or something that gives you some sense of sexual energy with them, right? That's attraction.
Yeah.
I also hear a lot of people who, you know, choose glamour over character. You know, and I know I'm old to say Ginger over Marianne or Marianne over Ginger. You probably don't remember Gilligan's.
For all you millennials, that's a Gilligan's Island reference. Sit right back and you'll hear a tale.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But Marianne, who was hot herself, you know, was this good Kansas girl.
Yeah,
and Ginger was this glamorous Hollywood girl, and they were both beautiful women. You know, but the idea was that men wanted Gingers who were, you know, incredibly beautiful, but she was a little empty-headed and a little vain. Yeah. And Marianne was like homespun, but, you know, she was very sexual. Right. And I think that sometimes you can't tell by looking. Sometimes the dressed-up glam girl doesn't necessarily have a depth in terms of her own sexual awareness, her own erotic core. You know, it's just on the surface. And so you have to know something deeper about them sexually, and that's what we want to talk about.
So you're saying one thing doesn't equal the other. Hot in looks doesn't equal hot in bed.
It doesn't.
Necessarily.
It doesn't. Not at all. For either gender. Yeah. I mean, a guy who's hot doesn't mean he's a great lover or patient or listens or is attentive.
Right.
Not at all.
So you're looking for that energy that they bring, that sexual energy that they bring to the awareness of their own body, aware of their own sexuality, flirting, being playful, being touching, right? A desire there.
You know, my kids, when they were young, the Backstreet Boys, right, were big. And they were singing, there was this song, if you want it to be good, girl, get yourself a bad boy. Do you remember that song?
Yeah. Were your sons into Backstreet Boys?
Oh, yeah.
They were?
Yeah.
I don't know that they would be. I can't wait to see their reaction when you put that out there to the world that they were super into Backstreet Boys.
But they were like bipping around singing this song, and I said, what do you think they're singing about? And of course they were a little young; they didn't quite know. And I said, well, what they're saying is, if you want it to be good, get yourself somebody who's had lots of lovers. And they were like, oh. And I said, but actually, if you want it to be good, you want to be with a partner who deeply listens to you. Because it's that sense of care about the other that actually creates a good lover, not the experience. I mean, I have sat with certainly men and women who say, I had like 30 lovers before I got married, and I know what I'm doing. And it's like their partner is, no, you don't. You clearly don't. I mean, experience actually is not always the best teacher.
Yeah.
And that's why I have a lot of hope for people who don't have many partners or who come into the marriage, as their one and only, and that they can grow it.
Yeah. So experience is different because it doesn't always lead to self-knowledge, right? To know what I want in bed or what I like, right? It doesn't always lead to that. But that's what one of the things that you want. And you don't just look for that sexually. You're looking for somebody who knows what they want inside and outside of the bedroom, right? And so, that's something you can see. That's something that's tangible, even without having sex. If somebody knows what they want, they're going to be able to ask for it clearly.
Somebody who can represent themselves, right, and say, this is it. I also think that this generation, what's so tragic is sex is so visual with porn and the movies and every kind of media influence. The difficulty is, I think they enter sexual relationships performing versus knowing, right, and experiencing and feeling and being sensually involved. There's so much pressure, to perform and to be like whatever it is they're seeing. So many of them really, even though they've had multiple lovers, really don't know anything about themselves or even about their partners.
Yeah. That, to me, is being comfortable in your own skin. If you're with somebody who is comfortable in their own skin, right, you kind of just know. Like, versus whether they're trying to put on a show or they're trying to act or they're trying to be something that they're not. Somebody that is comfortable in their own skin is relaxed. They know what they want, but they're also not forcing that on anybody else around them. Right. And that's some maturity. But you also want somebody, right, and you talk about that the other person is able to be responsive to you, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that is pretty huge.
Exactly. And I think as in so much as you want to be attracted to your partner, you want to make sure they're attracted to you too. That you have concrete evidence of that, through their open desire, through their asking, their initiation, all of that. Really important.
You don't want somebody that's turning away from you all the time.
Nope.
Right. I mean,
and somebody who's responsive.
Yeah, and because that's evidence that they're going to do that. They're going to do that sexually as well.
Exactly. And I often say, people, if sex goes off during the engagement, think twice. Like, for some reason or another, it's this critical point, right? They were sexual before they got engaged, and then when they get engaged, they turn it off for multiple reasons. And to me, that is a huge red flag.
Yeah.
I
think just a quick aside soapbox, right? Engagement does not mean you're already married.
It doesn't.
Right? I have so many. I hear people talk about, like, they get engaged and then red flags present themselves and then they feel stuck. And I'm like, this is not the case. You can be engaged. You can call off engagements. It's hard. It's difficult.
I was
engaged.
Not fun. I was engaged and called it off.
Me too.
Were you?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I was too. I
want to know that story.
Well, threw the ring in my face. So.
Oh my gosh!
But after I broke up with her,
I didn't have a ring. That might tell you something.
Oh yeah, you got engaged without a ring?
I did.
Oh, Laurie.
Yeah, I know. It was it was a problem. Yeah,
man,
my father said, "Laurie, he's dumb." I should have listened much sooner, but eventually it got through my dumb head at that point.
I don't know what it says about us that both of us were engaged.
We got to talk about this, maybe. And I want to tell I wanted to tell my story of how I got together with my husband. Maybe another podcast. Yeah. Okay, so I think you should also find somebody who has a positive body image.
How do you know they have a positive body image? How do they
I think you were talking about it. You were saying comfortable in their own skin, right? That they're not anxious about different areas of their body being touched. They enjoy they let loose. That they don't talk about it. constantly, about, I got to diet.
They're not flexing in the mirror all the time.
Well, flexing in the mirror might be like a positive thing, right?
It could be.
It could be.
It could be.
Or, they talk about and take care of their body with respect, so they eat well and they exercise and they do all that stuff. And Adam, though he's talking about brioche, I know that he actually exercises and eats well most of the time and all that.
Most of the time.
But it's like they have respect for their body. They don't denigrate it. And I think especially for women, right? This is key. This is the number one reason, or at least the number two reason I would say that women turn off to sex is actually they don't like their own body or they don't think their partner likes their body. And so they don't want it to be shown. I mean, it's just, there's a craziness. And that's in her head. Yeah. So I would definitely say be aware of that. But I think that there is huge pressure on men these days to be fit, have abs.
Yeah. That's why I was saying when I was talking about flexing in the mirror, I'm talking about I'd see guys that are they're in the gym twice a day. They're in the gym like every day. They're taking tons of supplements. They're like, I think what I mean by that is that's where they are fixated on, right? Which means that that is an insecure body image, right? When
it's more of a narcissism is what you're talking about, and that they need the flattery because they don't have a sense of confidence about their body.
Yeah, because when they lose that, when they're not able to maintain, they'll either neglect their partner or in their family to maintain that, or they'll lose that, and in both senses, it starts to be dangerous.
Yeah, not good.
So one of the things, if we're talking about premarital stuff, right? But one of the things that may happen, as we talked about in the beginning, is that if you're already married, you're already in a relationship, you may look at these things and go, well, I wish I would have known that.
I missed the boat.
But the thing is that there is still a way to work out of that, right?
Right.
And one of the things we're going to do is our next podcast is going to be about how to rekindle romance, like 10 steps, man, 10 practical things that you can do to bring some of this back if you didn't have this information before, which I think is really, really important. Because even though we wish we would have known all of this before, right, when we were dating our spouses, but it doesn't mean that you can't get that. You can't get that back, right?
I mean, I really think the main thing that creates a good sexual relationship is still character. It's like, a person who is willing to dig deep on their difficulties, right, and give those. And if you're a sexual pursuer, especially if you're a male sexual pursuer, you cannot overestimate your partner's need for emotional connectedness and how that causes growth in you. And if you're a sexual distancer, particularly female, you have to dig deep and know your body's arousal patterns and be willing to communicate that, to develop an eroticism that is internal, that is not simply triggered by your partner. And obviously, if you're congruent, both things are still necessary. So I see many couples who had hot sex, and it's just problematic. Because of the character flaws, the pursuer-distancer toxic pattern that gets in the way that decimates sex. So, I mean, I think that overall, yes, sex is healable, sex is growable. I mean, definitely.
And character is growable too, right? I mean, that's the good news. Both of those things can be altered, can be built upon, can be healed.
Yeah.
And so
I'm a different person than I was at the beginning of my marriage. I mean, much more stable.
Yeah. So am I, thank the Lord. I mean, if I was the same person I was 14 years ago, almost 15, that life would not be near as good if I was the exact same person.
Right.
So we can change, we can grow, we can be different.
Yeah. Okay. Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy. You're listening to our premarital episode. Thanks for listening.
You can now call in your questions to the Foreplay question voicemail. Dial 833-MY-4PLAY. That's 833-4-PLAY. And we'll use the questions for our mailbag episodes.
Hey, help us stay on top here at Foreplay. We'd love it if you would subscribe and share it with your friends. And please take 1 sec and rate and review us. Thanks so much.
All content is for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as a substitute for therapy by a licensed clinician or as medical advice from a doctor.